I'm going to show you how you can use service virtualization to create a virtual service from recording a live system. In this method, DevTest records the requests and responses that are passed between a client and a server. Once the traffic is recorded, the virtual service can then take the place of the live system. This is useful in situations where your access to the live system is not always available, or you want to configure additional scenarios that are hard to replicate on the live system. Or maybe there are transactional charges that make extensive testing costly. I'm going to be recording transactions for this demonstration using the Forward Cars application. Forward Cars is a demo application that's included with DevTest. It mimics an online car retailer and has separate modules that let users perform tasks, such as searching the inventory for a specific car, looking up a car's VIN, viewing the car's history report, financing a purchase by filling out a loan application, and then verifying that loan's status. To get started creating the virtual service, I'm going to go to the DevTest portal, and I'm going to click Virtual Services on the left panel, and then Create Virtual Services. Now on the Create a Virtual Service page, I'll select Recording as my method. Then I just need to make sure that I've selected the correct VSE server. For this demo, I only have one VSE available, so I'll select that. Now I'll give a name to the virtual service and enter a brief description. Forward Cars uses a REST API in the backend, so I'll select HTTP as my transport protocol. And now I'm ready to click Next. In this HTTP transport protocol screen, I can configure my recording. In the center of the screen, you can see an illustration of the workflow, with the recorder sitting between the client and the server. The client sends the request to the VS recorder, and then the recorder forwards that request to the server. We need to point the client to the recorder and point the recorder to the server. So back over in Forward Cars, I'll click Inventory Search. Notice how in the top left corner of the screen, there's a small lock icon. Clicking the lock, I can see that it's currently looking at the live endpoint. I'll copy this and paste it into the HTTP transport protocol screen as my recording target URL in the box on the bottom right. If you want to use a different port, you can click the padlock icon in the field below the VS recorder and then enter a different port. Just make sure that the port you enter is unused. For this demo, I'm also going to treat all of the recorded transactions as stateless. And now the recorded configuration is done. However, we need to update Forward Cars to point to the recorder instead of the live system. To do that, I'll go back to Forward Cars and change the port to 7001. I'll save this by clicking Set ESB. And now we're sending our transactions to the recorder instead of to the live system. Now I can go back to the portal and start my recording. Any actions that I take in the Forward Cars UI are being captured by the recorder. For example, when I go back to Inventory Search and view the details for a specific car. Now by clicking View Details, I can do a VIN lookup. I can also look at the Vehicle History Report. And then I can go back to the home page. For this video, I'm keeping things pretty simple. There are plenty of other tasks you can do in Forward Cars. But the important thing to notice is that back in the portal, you can see that the transactions are in fact being captured by the recorder. And once you've captured all the transactions you need, you can go ahead and stop your recording and click Next. And on this page, you can configure data protocol handlers on top of the transactions that you've just recorded. DevTest is going to look at the data you've captured and automatically assign the data protocols that are needed. For example, DevTest has seen that the transactions we just recorded are REST-based, so it's assigned the REST data protocol. But you can also change these selections. If you see that you have some JSON data, for instance, you could apply the JSON data protocol as well. And that goes for the response as well as the request. For this example, the REST protocol is all I need, so I can go ahead and click Next. On this page, I can configure the operation identification rules that are required to process the transactions. Again, DevTest has added the rules it thinks you need, but you can modify these rules as you see fit. What's here is sufficient for what I'm doing, so I'll go ahead and click Save All and then Next. On this page, I'm prompted to save my virtual service. So I can either save it and come back to it later, or I can save it and deploy it at the same time. Or the third option, I can save it and go into edit mode. I want to show you the virtual service that gets created, so I'll go ahead and click Save and Edit. Then I'm prompted to select the project I want to save it to. This defaults to your current project, which works for me. You also have the ability to automatically create baseline tests, which are headless tests that you can use to test against the virtual service and validate it. Now I can go ahead and click Finish. The system is now saving the virtual service and opening it so we can take a look. Here you can see the request data and the response data for each transaction. Now let's go ahead and deploy the virtual service so that any transactions that are generated by Forward Cars will now go to the virtual service instead of to the live system. To do that, I'm going to click Virtual Services on the left panel and then click Manage Virtual Services. Here you can see a list of all the virtual services in the current project in Cars Recording as the service we just created. I can click on Deploy to select Deploy Virtual Service. And on this screen, I can configure my deployment options. Again, I only have the one VSE server, so what's here is good. I can even assign a group tag to make it easier to monitor multiple virtual services together. And the option Think Timescale further provides an option to introduce delay or mimic other congestion issues. That's not something I need to worry about for this test, so I'll leave that at 100%. And now I can go ahead and click Deploy. You can see that it deployed successfully. Now I'll go to Virtual Services on the left side menu and select Monitor Virtual Service. Here I can see the virtual service and take note that it's running. Now I'll go back to Forward Cars and perform an inventory search. I'll look at the details for a particular car. Then I'll do a quick VIN lookup. Then I'll go back to the portal and note that the transaction number has increased to 8 and that these transactions are actually going to the virtual service instead of to the live system. One of the nice things about having this virtual service in place is that we can make changes to the service to test out specific scenarios without having to touch the actual live system. This means that as you look through the inventory search results, you can test some edge cases. For example, you need to change the price of one of the cars listed here. Let's say you want to make the price of this Audi A4 $1 million. Let's also say you need an additional car to test out some other scenario. Rather than making changes to the data in your live system or adding additional data elements, you can just make quick changes to the virtual service on the fly. In the real world, you might be changing some flag or other data value that makes sense for your testing scenario. But hopefully this simple example will give you an idea of what's possible. So back in the portal, I'm going to go back to my newly created virtual service, and here's the transaction that's giving us data for all the cars that are in inventory. Now this data is in JSON, so it's a little hard to read in its current format. I'll select the data and then click the settings icon in the upper right to format the data. I'll select JSON and then I'll select Auto Format Code. And now this is a little bit easier to read. The Audi A4 price is at the bottom of this screen, and I'll change it to $1 million. The last car in my inventory list was a BMW 5 Series. I'll go ahead and scroll down to take a look at that. The entry for that car is here. So I'll select this existing record and I'll copy and paste it as a new additional record. Then I'll make a few changes. First, I'll change the year from 2009 to 2010. And then I'll increase the price a bit from $32,295 to $37,295. Now I have an additional record in my data. I'll click the Save icon to save those changes. Now, for those changes to show up in the UI, I need to redeploy the virtual service. So I can go back to Virtual Services, Manage Virtual Services, and deploy the service again. Now back in Forward Cars, I'll refresh the page to see the new content. Here I see the Audi A4 is very expensive at an even $1 million. And at the bottom of the page, I'll see there's a new entry for a 2010 BMW 5 Series S. And we did all of that without actually touching the live system. So that's about it. I've shown you how to create a virtual service by recording live transactions. Then I deployed that service so that the UI was hitting the virtual service instead of to the live system. And then I showed you how you can edit elements in your virtual service to accommodate any testing requirements you have.